Hello, hello. It's time again to talk to you about everything that I read in the month of July. I mean, I say again, I'm not talking to you about what I read in July again. I'm talking to you about what I read during the month. It's time for a monthly wrap up. You know the drill. All right, we're going to cover a couple of different things. I'm going to talk about my reread of David Copperfield and my thoughts on that. I'm going to talk about my monthly stats. I'm going to talk about finishing the high school required reading challenge, update you on how I'm doing with Big Book Summer, and talk about any must reads I have and what I'm going to be doing with Herkiad 3.0 moving forward. So let me go ahead and get into it. It sounds like a lot, but hopefully it won't be too much. I'm going to start with David Copperfield, which is over here. So I read David Copperfield, which up to this point I have been calling my favorite book ever, like my best book of all time. It was a five-star read for me the first time I read it a couple of years ago now, and then I reread it as part of my members book club in the month of June, July. Really the end of June and the very beginning of July or something like that. And my thoughts. Guys, it's not a 5-star anymore. I feel a little crushed about this, but I had the fear that this was going to happen and that it wasn't going to be a 5-star anymore, and it's not. It's really close. I gave it 4.5 stars, and let me see if I can explain why. I reread it this time, and when I reread it, I was initially intending to sit down and reread the whole thing physically, and as I got going, I just found myself being impatient, and I've been feeling that way in my reading recently. I don't know if I've read too many large books back to back or too many small books, I don't know, but I just did not have the patience to sit and physically read it. And I recall the first time I read this book that I needed patience to read it. So I listened to the entire thing, all almost 900 pages of this on audiobook, and I did really enjoy that. However, upon rereading it and listening to it over again, it brought back to mind some of the flaws in the book that I knew were there, but it really highlighted to me just how prevalent they are throughout the novel. One of it being the pacing. There are times where things are going along and I'm really gripped by the book and the novel and what's happening in the plot and all the characters, and I'm absolutely loving it. And then there are times where there are scenes that I just don't care about. And these are scenes that I know from my previous reread, like, don't need to be as long as they are. And it bothered me more this time around because I would just be tempted to tune out. Or if I was reading it, I would have been tempted to skim over that part because I would have known what was significant about it. So I am wondering if maybe I reread this too close to my original read and if I just needed to forget more of the book to enjoy it. But I feel like a good book, you should be able to reread pretty frequently and get more out of it each time. I did get more out of the reading this time. I noticed some more connections. Of course, I noticed all the foreshadowing. But even with all that, there were just times where the book just felt really slow and where certain of the scenes just felt rather irrelevant and made me almost want to feel bored if I didn't know what was going to be happening. So I can totally see how people quit on this book or get bored while reading it or DNF it or that kind of thing because there are parts that are just hard to connect to. That said, it still got a 4.5 because there are still so many things that I love in this book. I love the characters that are good, the found family aspect of it, the vibrancy of the people involved. I love the complexity of the villains. I love that there's multiple villains in this book and that while they're easy to hate, it's also easy to see like what their issues are and the commentary surrounding it. And the writing is something that I really enjoy most of the time. So it's still really highly rated for me. It just wasn't the 5-star that it was the first time. Now I'm going to put David Copperfield down, and I don't think I'm going to pick him up for a good while. And now I'm stuck with the question of if this isn't my favorite book of all time, what is? I have no idea, but I'm not going to figure that out in this video. So let's move on. Put him back in the pile where he was. I'll come back to him in a moment. Let's move on to my stats. I overall had a really good reading month. I read 11 books this month, which is I guess relatively high for me, but you'll see quite a few of them were shorter reads, and that was partially intentional on my part. I have realized that in order to read some of the long books that I have and want to enjoy, I need to be intentional about including a lot more smaller books in between. And so I did that this month and it worked out really well. I read about 3,028 pages this month. My goal is usually 3,000 pages, so it put me right around that spot that I wanted to be. By the stars, let me tell you about the books I read. I will put up on the screen for you, as usual, a picture so that you can see every book that I read this month and what I rated it. And then here is sort of what the breakdown ended up looking like. These books were all 3.5 stars for me. I did have quite a few 3.5 stars this month. Technically, I didn't read Sula this month, but I talked about it this month during one of my reading sprints. So I will link that below if you wanted to hear about the last book we read for our high school required reading challenge. And I will be mentioning Sula again in a moment. But these other 4 books were also 3.5 stars. This one I wasn't so surprised by. This is Cocoon. This was just a book I picked up randomly. It's put out by Europa Editions. They're usually 3.5 and 4 stars for me, so I wasn't shocked that this one was. These two in the middle here, The Other Valley and Grievers, were, I think, both on my most anticipated books of the year list, and so it was kind of a bummer to have them both hit so low in terms of star rating. I did have a 4 star read, and surprisingly, just one. Is that correct? I guess so. If those were 3.5, this is 4, and that was for the Stepford Wives. This was a good book. I've seen the movie, but I still enjoyed reading the book for the first time. I had two 4.5 star books, and this is not one of them. I just put it there to remind me of one of them because I need to put it on the screen for you. For my library reading challenge, I read 2 books. One of them I gave 4.5 stars, and that was for This Princess Kills Monsters. The other 4.5 star book I already talked about. It was David Copperfield. In some ways, that feels like a huge disappointment. However, it was made up by the fact that I had multiple 5 star reads this month, and I'm not mad about that. I read the graphic novel of Nat Turner. That was just a surprise pick, but fit in really well, and I really liked it. I actually read 2 books this month for my library reading challenge. This was the 5 star that I got out of that, and honestly, this is one of my favorite books that I read this month. I mean, it's outranking David Copperfield. How crazy is that? I also gave 5 stars to Flowers for Algernon and The Perfect Nine. The Perfect Nine is probably my favorite book that I read this month. Yeah, yeah. Now that I think about that and look at all the books I gave 5 stars, The Perfect Nine is the perfect book for this month. I really, really enjoyed that read. Most of the books that I read from this month were set in the US, and I realized I haven't updated you guys on my US map that I'm doing. I have been spending this year diamond painting the locations in the US of the books that I've read. So every time I read a book from a different state, I update my US map, and this is what it's looking like so far. How cool is that? I am really loving this. There is definitely a whole area of the US that's missing. And honestly, I think that's going to be pretty hard to fill in. I don't feel like I read a lot of books set in like Idaho or Montana or Utah. I mean, I can think of a few that are, but I've already read them. And then there are like a couple of states over here, like, is Pennsylvania going to be hard? I feel like I recently looked at a book on my shelf that's set in Pennsylvania, but it's going to be interesting to see how those other states come along. But I'm really liking the way this is looking, and I'm so glad I decided to do that as a little project. And in case you diamond paint, I'm just using extra drills that I have, and I picked up this wood cutout from a craft store, and at the craft store near the diamond painting, they sell diamond painting glue. And so I just paint on the little glue, and you just have to let it dry a little bit, and then it becomes tacky, and you can put on your diamond paints. So if you diamond paint and you're trying to figure out what to do with your leftover drills, you could do that. I mentioned that I completed the high school required reading challenge. This is a reading challenge I've been doing with my friend Alex. We have spent basically the last year it took us working on rereading 10 books, 5 from each of us that we read in high school. And we even kept a little report card. Here it is. Here's how we did overall and for each individual book. And we didn't score so well, or the books didn't anyway. But I have no regrets. I really enjoyed doing this. We did talk about our last book, Sula, in the month of June, I guess, actually. But for some reason, I'm not talking to you about it until the end of July. I don't really understand what's going on. These are the books that I read in July, right? I'm now really confused by that. Anyway, I haven't mentioned this to you yet because I already filmed my June wrap up by the time we talked about this in July or June. Whatever. This was the last book we read, and we talked about it in a reading sprint that I hosted in July. Maybe that's why I'm talking to you about it now. So I will link that in the description box below if you want to go and check out our thoughts on Sula, but you can see what we both scored it on the report card here. And yeah, I was saying I have no regrets in doing this challenge. It was actually really fun and interesting to see what we thought about these books, what we remembered, what we had forgotten, that kind of thing. I did reconfirm that I did truly enjoy the things they carried. That was my favorite book from high school, and it was one of my favorite books off this list that we read. And the other thing that I think I walked away with is to try more of the sort of what I would have considered difficult reads from high school and college, particularly those that were written in older English or in a different style than I think I would be comfortable with. Specifically, in this case, I'm thinking of sort of the more epic or poetic narratives that we read this year. I actually really enjoyed reading the Odyssey, even though I don't know. The epic conventions used in there drove me crazy a bit, but I still actually enjoyed the story itself. And the same is true for the Canterbury Tales. And it made me realize just how important having a good translation, even in books that were originally written in an older form of English, can be, and to try different formats, even of epic poetry, to see if I like them. So it gave me a lot more courage, for example, to go and then read the Epic of Gilgamesh and reread that this year, and I really enjoyed that. And I made sure that I got it in a translation that I would like. So as far as the high school required reading challenge goes, Alex and I have decided to do it again. We are going to start it next year in January, so there will be an announcement video coming out at the end of this year. And just to share some of the excitement with it, we will be doing high school rereads again. We will be doing 4 books this time instead of the 10 books we gave ourselves. And part of that is because we're hoping to spend a little bit more time with each book. What books we will be picking, we'll be talking about that and how we're going to go about working through them and that kind of thing, and all the details when we do an announcement video later this year. And we're really excited about it. We think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're doing it in a way so that like people can join us, and we'll have more information about all of that as we go along. It should be a good time. And while you may not feel like you want to reread books from high school, I think you'd be surprised. I know Alex and I both were surprised by how this went. It was a lot of fun, if nothing else. Okay, Big Book Summer. I'm participating in this. This is a reading challenge where you are challenged to read books over 400 pages from Memorial Day in the US until Labor Day. And I'll put up on the screen, probably below me or something like that, all the books that I have read so far in the months of June and July that are over 400 pages long. And I have read 6 total to date. 2 of them were in the month of July, and my favorite of those 2 was King Tut. And yes, I liked that better than David Copperfield, at least the reading experience. I think there's really good things about both of them, but I could definitely see myself perusing and rereading parts of King Tut much sooner than David Copperfield at this point. I also usually share with you my must-reads for the next month, so my must-reads for August are nothing. We're done with our high school required reading challenge. I do have the next book for my members book club, and that is The Jungle, but we're not talking about that until the end of September, so I don't have to read it in August, though I'll probably start it in August at some point. I don't know. We'll see. And yeah, my local in-person book club, I'm not going to read the book they're reading for August because August tends to be busy and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be in town. And then I have a book club that I'm doing with some friends, but we only meet occasionally, and all of us, for various reasons, figured meeting at the end of September would be easier. So I have no required reading for the month of August, so that's kind of nice. I don't know what I'll do with my time. I'll read. I'll just read something that I don't have to. I am participating in Herkiad 3.0. However, I've decided not to include my Herkiad updates in my monthly wrap up unless I've finished prompts that I haven't talked to you about. So my plan right now for Herkiad 3.0 is to once a month have one video that I focus on one prompt from Herkiad and try and finish as much as I can from that. So if you want to see how I did in the month of July, I'll include that video in the description box below as well, so you can check that out. Like and subscribe if you want to see what I do with that in the future. It should be interesting each and every time. And beyond that, I will only include Herkiad updates in my monthly wrap-ups. if I've finished prompts that I haven't talked about or haven't done a video on. And that's not the case as of right now. I have definitely worked on a lot of different prompts, but I haven't actually finished a single one yet, which is not surprising for Herkiad. Like all 25 prompts on the bingo board for Herkiad have sub prompts within them. And so it can take a while to finally check off a square on the bingo board. So when that happens in my monthly wrap up, you will probably hear about it. All right, well, I think that's it. Let me get together my stack of books because it's nice and big this month. So here it is. This is everything that I read in the month of July, as well as the book that I borrowed from the library that I'm pretty sure I want to own. I usually keep everything at this point that's a 4 or 5 star, certainly everything that's a 5 star. So these two books at the bottom here will be kept for sure, as well as The Perfect Nine. That was one of my other 5 star reads, as well as Flowers for Algernon. The only 3 that I know I will probably be unhauling for sure are The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, Grievers, and The Other Valley. Grievers, however, I have the second book in that series, so I'll probably wait to unhaul Grievers until I've read the second book so that I can unhaul them together, unless the second book is like amazing. Well, that was amazing. Anyway, clearly I need to get off the camera now. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go put away all the books that I want to keep. And I'm probably going to go post on Pango all the books that I don't want to keep. And that's it for me. Let me know how your reading month went. I hope you had a great time reading and read some awesome books. Let me know what your 5 star read was from this month if you had one. And I'll talk to you next time.